we'll give Tara just another minute or two before we get started. Give her a chance to dial in. All right. Good morning, everyone. And Tara, is that you dialing in?
It is.
All right, great. We have, good morning, everyone. All the trustees, Tara, since you don't have a video, all the trustees have dialed in, and we have Alex and Ashley on the line, and we're ready to get started. So we'll call the meeting to order. And are there any public appearances? And I think not. I don't see anybody in there. Any announcements from the trustees?
Bill, should we do roll call?
Yes, let's do roll call. That's right. Thanks, Tara. Keep me online.
Sure.
Don Krischer.
Yes.
Don McDougall. I saw his lips move. Susan Murphy.
Yes.
Bill Pardue.
Here.
Tara Twomey.
Present.
All present. Thank you.
All right. So now I guess I should call for public appearances again, just to be street legal. And then announcements from the trustees.
Yes, we are going to have a book sale. Yay. August 12th, 13th, and 14th at the Youth Center, which is, if you don't know where it is, it's above the kind of above the police station, 4th and Taurus, and we're going to it will be a smaller one because we have a smaller space, and we've made almost $500 selling books and taking donations at the farmers market in Carmel. So we won't be there this week, but next week come by and see us. That's my announcement.
That's great. Thanks. Any other announcements? Okay. Announcements from the library director?
One big announcement on June 7th, we'll be starting our summer reading program, and we'll be launching Outside Library. So while we wait for staff to come on board, which I feel confident about, receiving the staff requests from City Council in this current budget, they'll be reviewing again next week. We'll be launching Outside Library. You've probably seen some of our newsletters about this. This will enable people to actually browse our collections, people who have been missing that. We are still operating now under the Cal OSHA restrictions, which would make it interesting and onerous to have people back in the buildings again. We did come up with a kind of a quick plan for that, but it would mean a reduction in hours of service compared to what we are operating with curbside. And the new model will allow us to have same day hold pickups in some cases, and for people to be able to browse. So the staff are really excited. They've been working really hard on our new Outside Library, new iteration. And I think it'll be a really good bridge to easing people back into library services again, while we wait for staff to come back on board.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, anything else? Any questions for Ashley on that before we move forward? Okay, I don't see anything on the consent agenda. So we'll move on to the orders of business. Wait. Don't we need to approve the minutes from the last? Okay, I'm sorry. Receive the report from the Carmel Library Foundation on recent activities.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. So we have the last event of the year, the Sterling Circle reception, which for those of you who may not be familiar, that's for legacy members. A Sterling Circle member is when someone pledges to leave something, anything to the library in their estate. So what we're going to do, instead of a gathering, which we typically do at the Harrison or the Park Branch location, we are going to be delivering books. We have a beautiful poetry book and some chocolates, and we have that tote market bag. That's the signature Library Foundation bag that we're going to be giving. Also, we're looking at for next year to launch a new resident outreach. We have been kind of gathering information about that. We have some realtors on our board that are helping us identify new people moving into the community. So we want to work with the library on that, and we want to move forward. I met with the Sunset Director, the Sunset Center's executive director, a few weeks ago to find out when and if we could be holding our programs at Carpenter Hall and Sunset Center Theater. While they're going to be opening probably in the fall for some programs, it's still a little bit tentative. We did secure an April 13th date for our next year's annual fundraising event, but we're not sure about the program. So we're looking at a hybrid model. We budgeted for that. And we might even do some live streaming when we do a live event, if we're permitted to do so, if we're permitted to gather. And we have a search for a new social media underway, and that looks promising. We have some long-term board directors terming off this year, and we have two new ones that we're really excited about. One's an EVP from Pebble Beach Company for strategic business, and another one's a former attorney from Atlanta, and also she was an administrator at a private school in Atlanta. And so we're really excited about those two, but we're still looking for additional board directors. If you have anyone that you might want to help us identify, we'd appreciate that. Program development is underway, and we're working on a survey for our community. We have sort of a template survey that we've been using the last few years, but because of COVID, we want to find out, more about individuals appreciating the online versus coming to the programs, because we've had really good attendance, probably averaging between 100 and 250 each time we've had just the programs themselves. And then in terms of the annual fundraiser, we had year-over-year fundraising comparisons. We did almost as good as the time when we sold out the Thomas Friedman event. So broaching that $120,000 mark, we did spend some money on some VIP gift baskets, even though some things were contributed, and we received, good pricing on certain things, certain items. But so we were pretty even with that. And I was thinking about that a lot. I'd really attribute that to, obviously it's a difficult year and people wanted to help the library. And we did a lot of promotion for that, but also it was a good stock market year. So I think people were looking to help us there too and help themselves. We're contemplating next year's speaker, and we really want to maintain that high level, well-known entity. Again, if you have any ideas for us, we'd love to have a female speaker this year. We've had several male speakers, but if we have a good candidate, we will not turn them away. And Douglas Brinkley, he was our speaker this past year. He's offered to come back and present. He's publishing a new book in May, and he'll present in June his new book. And he's also so that he might assist us. And some names we're floating right now, Margaret Atwood. I know Tobias Wolff just published a new book and some of his former collections. Love to get Michelle Obama. Aim high. And let's see who else is on my list. And we welcome any other suggestions. I know Amy Tan she just published memoirs. And Susan Orleans, I did approach last year. I approached a few people, Twyla Tharp. I'd love to get Terry Gross and a guest. If anyone has any connections to NPR or Terry Gross, that would be great. So those are just some, and Michael Lewis came out with a new book too, and Malcolm Gladwell's interesting, and that's it. So those are some names that I'm interested in. And if you have anybody or any connections, I'd really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions?
All right. I don't hear any questions from the board members. Sounds like y'all are it's pretty ambitious schedule you're lining up as far as invitees for potential invitees for next year's board meeting. Wish you luck.
Thank you.
With that list, you should probably hold 3 or 4 events.
Well, that's my dream list. So we'll see what actually happens. But you know, like Wayne Gretzky,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Never know how far you can get unless you aim high, right? There you go. Well, thank you. If we come up with any contacts or anything like that, we'll be sure to let you know. And then also for any potential board members for the Library Foundation. And thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate it.
Are there any particular skills you're looking for in terms of your board members, or do you have a mix of?
We have a very eclectic board right now. We have a few millennials and men and women. We'd love to get someone of color on the board. It would be terrific for some diversity to the board. We would also like to have some additional males on the board. It's right now there are many more females than males on the board, but in terms of skill sets, a seasoned board person would be great. We have some people who are new to boards, so that would be terrific. Someone who's connected in the community. We are a fundraising board, so anyone who has philanthropic experience is, really what we're looking for at this time. Thank you for asking.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes from the April 28th, 2020 board meeting.
I move the minutes be approved from the April 28th board meeting as submitted.
I second it.
We get a roll call? Or a vote?
Yeah. And I realize it says 2020, but it is 2021. Don Krischer.
Way to be, Leslie. Thank you.
Don Krischer.
Yes.
Don McDougall.
Yes.
Susan Murphy.
Yes.
Phil Pardue.
Yes.
Tara Twomey.
Yes.
Approved. Thank you.
All right. So we'll move on to item number 3, receive the librarian's report for April 2021.
So I'm sure you all reviewed the numbers. There isn't much change. We're in a holding pattern here with we're not seeing a huge increase in the number of people or huge numbers of increasing for electronic checkouts. That has leveled out, as well as our hard copy circulation. So we've settled into this pattern now with people coming to curbside and doing their electronic checkouts. I'm anticipating this will change once we launch the outside library and people are able to browse, hoping it will change and that people who have been missing that ability to do that will start coming back to the library. So we're not seeing any major dips. I'm not too worried at this point, just looking forward to getting back to regular library services and looking forward to a summer reading program, which is always a big time for us. We'll be looking at what we can do in terms of programming. It'll be online again this year, but we do have some ideas about what we can do throughout the summer for programs and utilizing the park, and some wonderful volunteers who want to work with us and work on programming. So we'll see, I think, an uptick in numbers coming up soon. Any questions?
Right. John, any questions?
I was kind of surprised at the way things leveled off this last month. It seems like people are doing other things and not worried about using the books as much and being at home. I'm curious, like she said, to see what happens once it opens up, whether people go back and start really using it.
I think people will. The feedback that we're getting from patrons is that they want to be back in the library and they've appreciated curbside service so far. It's been fun and interesting to watch the trends in checkouts. This is just anecdata from the librarians on the ground, but we've watched people cycle through the pandemic, what is popular for reading. So for a while there, it was a lot of the classics. People were taking time during the pandemic and being locked down to revisit the classics. We saw a lot of cookbooks and baking books gardening books last summer. And right now, this last spring, what we've been seeing is travel books. So as things start to open up, people are traveling, and the calls that we're getting are, please, will you make an exception for me? I want to get my books. We're going out of town. That has been the last few weeks. That is what we're hearing. So I think that the little bit of drop off that you see in our overall circulation, I think it's like 100 books, is that people are starting to move around more and go to places more. So, and again, we're seeing a huge uptick in our travel book circulation.
All right, Don, do you have any questions? Not at all.
No, I was going to add, when I've been at the table, which has been 4 weeks, at the questions I get are, when is the library going to open? You know, can we contribute books? We're not taking any more books right now. But when is the library going to open? People are really anxious to get in and browse through books, which is kind of interesting. Almost everybody who's local who stops by, that's their question for me.
Tara, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. The one question I have is we talk about the potential lifting of the restrictions on June 15th. How does that affect the library operations at that point? I mean, we talk about the California OSHA, and what is the relationship between the two?
So whatever Cal OSHA says in terms of those laws trumps what we do in terms of the greater reopening. So for instance, right now, if we figured out a model to open the Park Ranch Library, having all of the new adult books and things here in the lobby so adults could still browse, and making the children's collections available. Pre-pandemic, where each hour we have 2 staff members scheduled on the floor, at least 2 staff members, sometimes 3, depending on the time of day and how busy we are. With the restrictions, we would need to monitor the number of people in the building at any given time and not exceed a certain amount. We would need to have people, just if you've been to a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment, and you have those 3 questions you have to answer about, have you had COVID? Do you know anyone that has COVID? Do you have symptoms? We would need to be doing that before we let anybody in the building for contact tracing. So it would be a completely different library experience than the one we're proposing with outside library, and completely different than pre-pandemic library. So, and it would increase the number of staff we would need to execute it. So Cal OSHA will trump whatever the governor says on June 15th, unless Cal OSHA makes some changes before then, which they had a meeting last week. They did not make any changes to masks. You can see Susan and I we're both vaccinated, but we're wearing our masks because it is required here in our workplace now. All of the staff have been vaccinated, and if we are on duty, we are wearing our masks. They're scheduled to meet June 3rd, and they may relax the restrictions that we are currently operating under at that point in time. So I'm not sure. We're still operating under unknowns, and that's where we are. I feel hopeful about June 15th, but I'm not sure where we're going to land, and we'll have to continue to work with the city and HR on how we proceed.
Okay, I think Don has a question here.
So if you have these, well, what I'll call COVID welcomes, you described, would you be using a librarian to do that, or could you solicit a volunteer to do that? It seems like that's something that would be wasteful of a librarian to do.
That is an excellent question, and I had a conversation with HR about that, and we have to be careful about how we use volunteers. And whether or not we're running afoul of anything that could be a challenge to the unions and taking a person's job or job duties. So that is complicated. And we are trying to figure out, as we move forward, how to bring back the volunteers that we had pre-pandemic who have already been vetted through our system, and how we use those, because any volunteers we have still need to be managed by staff and coordinated by staff. And that's an additional thing for us to think about and worry about with everything else that we're doing. So we're trying to figure that piece of it out to maximize our resources.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, as we go forward, there've been a lot of quick changes to protocols going forward. I think that would be wise to have a understanding that you can't turn on a dime. You got to get staffing in place. You have to do different things. But if the Cal OSHA should change its requirements, have some kind of messaging ready to go to the community on what the transition would look like. I'm not advocating going against Cal OSHA or the governor, but just if it ends up being like the CDC last month, where they just did 180, we'd probably want to have a messaging showing that we've thought about this in advance. It's going to take a little bit of a transition. And then as soon as we get the change in the Cal OSHA, whether it's this week, June 15th or September, whatever, or next year, that we know what the transition is going to look like, and we can very quickly tell the community so that we can hopefully avoid some teeth gnashing for people who want to go into the building the very next day.
Yeah, no, the staff and I are working on that messaging, and we continue, we did focus on outside library when we felt like that would be a better service model to bridge us through to opening and the return of staff. But we will continue and are continuing to discuss our both library buildings, how we would staff them, what the schedule is going to look like once we have everybody on board, and continuing to do those plans so that we are ready to go. And we might not be able to turn on a dime, but we will be maybe turn on a $50 or quarter, I don't know, something like that. We'll be as quick as we can with that launching.
I happened to be traveling when the CDC thing came out. It was a little bit of the Wild West in the airport as people started going up in arms on why they couldn't do certain things and others. I'd prefer not happen at our library. If there's some transition on that the public understands and that we can articulate. And I think it'd take a lot of pressure off the librarians, especially if you're outside, where people can very quickly both tell you how happy they are and what they're not happy about.
Right. Right, and we've got talking points ready for that to explain why we're operating the way we are, and we've worked on those things. So yes.
Good. All right, Don, I see you.
Yeah, I think Phil makes a really good point. And the other question is, you're obviously anticipating some sort of staging by going to the outside library as the next step from curbside. Is there some thought of, opening the children's library and, a month later, a week later or whatever, opening the main library or something, so that there's a staging process that gives you some chance to communicate properly, like Phil was suggesting?
So again, that will be contingent on an increase in staff, and it will be contingent on whatever Cal OSHA comes down with on June 3rd, if they make any changes to the laws. Because right now, if June 15th happens and Cal OSHA hasn't changed and we don't have any more staff in place, we would be reverting back to that original model I talked about that we developed, where we would be, greeting people at the door and have 3 staff members dedicated to however many hours of service. I think I calculated at 8, in order to keep all of the other operations and books coming in and everything else that we do behind the scenes, answering phones 5 days a week, all of that. And I mean, there's 4.5 of us. I'm not really a full person here. We take vacations, we get sick, we're humans. And so there's also that balance of what can we actually physically and mentally accomplish in terms of customer service, so that we have a steady stream and it's not this up down of, oh, we have to close now because there's not enough people type of thing. So we're trying to factor in all of that as we're making our plans going forward.
So it's, based on what you've said there, Ashley, you could be looking at, if you were, for the sake of argument, Cal OSHA met on the 3rd, and they said that, we're waiving all our requirements and you can now go back to normal. Not that they're going to do that. That would be actually the worst case for you, because, now you have to go figure out what your staffing needs to be, pull the volunteers back, so you're working with the union, getting the volunteers. So it could be weeks from the time that you were told that you can go till you can get one of the buildings open, much less both the buildings open. And we're not talking days, we're talking weeks.
Right, yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, and Susan pointed out, and I don't know why we weren't included in this article, but there was an article 2 days ago in the Herald that I took a look at, and you'll see Monterey Public was very clear that they're not making any attempts at opening or doing any services. They're in a similar position we are with the level of staff that they have.
Yep.
Until after July 1st, once their budget is adopted and that they can know that more people are coming and start to pivot and make those plans.
Okay.
Be in a similar boat as Monterey Public. The county libraries, in terms of staff losses at the beginning of the pandemic, were not hit as hard as the rest of us were, who are so dependent upon TOT, our cities, and visitor sales tax.
So do we, would it be worthwhile to say the same type of thing either on our website or through the Pine Cone, just to
Yes,
prep people as we go forward?
yes, definitely.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, any other questions before we move on here? Okay, thank you very much, Ashley. All right, Don, over to you. We're going to receive the treasurer's report and approve the check register for April 2021.
So I guess without screen sharing here, just briefly to talk through the April results. Everybody should have received the package. I've done the same thing I've done before, which is
That's better.
create a pro forma version, so you could see that the foundation money is just simply a timing issue. But if it's not there, then it's really hard to understand. I think that there's not all of my comments are there in what was distributed. I don't think there's an awful lot more to say other than that Ashley's done a nice job of continuing to manage the funding and provide respect for the foundation's money that's coming in. Are there any questions on that? Or has everybody looked at the financials?
Mm-hmm.
John, do you have any questions? Are you okay with that?
Yes. You've helped me out quite a bit understanding it. Thank you very much.
Okay,
With that, I would move for the adoption of the check register that's included in the package.
This is Tara. I second.
Okay, roll call. John Krischer,
Yes.
John McDougall,
Yes.
Susan Murphy,
Yes.
Bill Pardue,
yes.
Tara Twomey.
Yes.
Approved, thank you.
All right. On to item number 5, review the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 budget.
All right. So the budget before you is a very similar budget to last year. I think we were spot on in the work that Dawn and I did in trying to anticipate what we would need for this very weird pandemic year. And as we just discussed, there are still a lot of unknowns in the next few weeks. Hopefully we'll have more answers, but I do think that there's still always a possibility that we may slide back into some restrictions if there's variants or surges, or we should be prepared. This budget, I'm looking into transitioning to reopening the library buildings. It's a largely status quo budget, just a slight reduction of $2,000 from last year's budget, and that's based on what we've spent this year. I anticipate in the next fiscal year building back up in terms of our spending, especially for hard copy materials, when we have more staff on hand to do some more of that curated collection development that we have automated for this year and the last fiscal year. Our administration expenditures are decreasing just under $3,000 from the previous fiscal year. I do want to keep a line item in for COVID and pandemic supplies. I anticipate that we'll still need to have probably, of course, hand sanitizer everywhere. That's not only a good thing for COVID, but also just colds in general. We may need to make masks available. I mean, there's, again, still unknowns, and then to prep our buildings for that. And we may see some city support, hopefully, with some of those expenses. I did reduce the staff training budget a slight bit because some of the conferences we've attended have become virtual. And also, as staff and humans, we will need to figure out how comfortable we are with travel and how far and what that looks like. So we will be continue to work on our training, make it a priority, but also we're in a little bit of a different place than we were pre-pandemic.
If I can interrupt briefly, to Phil's point earlier, one of the things that Ashley did in terms of advertising was increase the budget a little bit. I think there is an awareness that communications is going to be probably more important, and I think that was a good point. I think the other thing that that happened was because there weren't people in the office, we experienced the use of an awful lot less office supplies. So the major savings in administration is, gee, we got away without using all those office supplies. Maybe we can continue not using all those office supplies. And I think that's a good strategy that Ashley's taking there. Sorry, Ashley.
No, thank you, John, for chiming in on that. Yes, we've all become incredibly acclimated to using Google Drive and document sharing, and there's certainly less paper being passed around between the staff who are still here. So yes, we will continue to focus on marketing and communications, and our advertising and library promotions will continue to be important in this transition year. Moving on to our library assets, actually, let me not skip IT. For our desktop replacements, I confirmed with IT that we're okay there. I do want to replace 2 of our staff laptops. We've been using those heavily. We continue to use those for Zoom meetings. And I want to make sure that we're up to date on those. The other thing I would like to do is, and this was something I'd planned pre-pandemic, and I think it will lend itself well as we transition out of the pandemic, which is to invest some money in laptop lending. Because of social distancing at the Main, I started the process of putting some distance between our desktop computers to the public computers. And I think laptop lending combined with our wireless printing capabilities will be really good. And it's something that at the start of this new fiscal year, as we have the outside library up and running, we can start to beta test so that people can do wireless printing here. And we can see how that laptop lending model works.
So the laptop lending is just, you lend the laptop while they're within the outdoor library, and then they have to return it before they leave?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. And it was something I'd been thinking about for in particular pre-pandemic, for the children's department. I want to make sure that all kids who come in that department have access to technology. But at the same time, one of the frequent complaints of parents who come in there, because of our user base, majority of whom have access to technology, they don't like that computers are front and center. They want kids sitting down and reading or working on their studies, not on the off stations and playing games. And kids tend to gravitate towards those things in games. So a happy medium, I felt, was to look at having Chromebooks on hand, which kids are familiar with because they use them in the school district. So they're available if they need them after school. They don't have theirs, they forgot them, whatever the case is. But those things aren't front and center when you come into that department, so that we're responsive to our users. So I think it'll be a good thing for us to test out.
Before we go, just while we're on the IT, what's the replacement cycle for the staff laptops and computers? Do you have a cycle of every so many years? What I'm used to is every 3 years they get replaced because that's when they leave warranty.
So I'm not
metric for that, or?
Ours have been on a 3-year cycle.
Okay.
And the laptops, I mean, staff department directors have had laptops at the start of the pandemic. We did purchase a few additional laptops for staff. We already had some on hand. There was one ready for reference for presentations. And so the library was in a good place because we had some access to more than other departments did. So this is replacing some of those which were, like I said, mentioned the reference laptop, good workhorse laptop, kind of off of IT's radar because we weren't making that investment in IT. It wasn't on their radar to make that investment and treat them the same way as the replacements for desktops. So I think that is going to be a shift within IT.
So is are we shifting to laptops with docks, or do we still want to have desktops?
I'm not sure where they'll go with that. At one point we've shifted back and forth, and it's dependent on who's IT. We started out with laptops with docks for the department director specifically so that we could pick up in an emergency and go home and leave. Our new IT director came in and moved us back to desktops with laptops as a supplement for department directors. And so we're in a transition, figuring out where we want to go.
So who pays for the library staff's computers? Does the trustees or does the city?
The city does not. So that's part of our equipment is our IT budget and our computer replacements.
Okay, so then so my question would be, which works best for the trustees to buy for you? Is it the laptops with the docking stations so that, if you end up having another pandemic close down, or, you all have been, you were able to get your vaccines early because you were part of the emergency response for fires or anything like that. Does it make sense to have everybody have their laptop with their docking station? Or is it going back to the old desktops?
At this point, we are using our laptops heavily. They have supported us in doing our work, I think, better because we are mobile now. We can take our laptops and be anywhere in either one of the buildings and still answering phones using our OnSIP application. So I think that the investment in laptops at this point is more important than desktops.
Right. So I think the trustees, I'm sure, will correct me, but we're willing to get you the right IT that you need. We just need to know what works best for you. So just, I'm sure you'll let us know. The other question, one final question, not to belabor this too long, is when we do the sharing out of the laptops, what are we doing with the cybersecurity portion of that? Making sure that, how are they going to be locked down so people can't put their own programs on and then we become liable because somebody's email's been stolen because they went on our computer going forward? At the library.
We'll be
Have you thought about that, or?
Yes, I have thought about that, and we'll be using the same software that we use for the desktop computers, which is a program called Deep Freeze. So it does not allow you to make any changes to the computer, install programs, do anything like that. And when your session is done, it wipes everything clean. So if you came on and you did a Word document and you put it on the desktop and then printed it out from there, the next person that comes in once you've logged out, that would be wiped clean and it would no longer be visible to that person.
Okay. All right. That's all I have on the IT stuff. I'll let you, as long as okay, Don has a question.
Don, you're muted.
You brought up the docking station, and my question is, are there, people are moving towards using laptops, but with screens. Is there any other work that you're doing at the library, say that, by the way, when I'm there, I need my laptop and I need a much bigger screen to deal with? I agree with Phil. We should be buying you what you need, and laptops may not always be sufficient.
They may not. I'm sitting here at my desk right now with the laptop in front of two giant screens because it's nice to use the two screens side by side when I'm working on something big like the budget, and I can have multiple things going on at a time. So Again, as we work through this and come out of the pandemic, it may change, our needs may change a little bit. But I can tell you that the laptops have taught us that we're not as tied to desks as we thought we were. And that's a good lesson to have learned.
Yeah, so I've watched the military combatant commands go to totally laptop, and I've watched a university go totally laptop because of the people. It's now the hybrid works situation. People can go back and forth, and the way they get around having, in fact, the screens are bigger now than they were when they had the desktops, because they used to get all-in-ones. Now they get these huge monitors that they can put on a wall, and then they'll just hook their laptop up to that, and and now they have a wall-size monitor. So we can certainly you can make just about anything work, and we just need to know what the requirements are to help you on that.
For libraries, we clearly need hardened computers as well.
Okay. I'll let you proceed on. Sorry to derail you there, Ashley.
No derailing. This is a good conversation to have, and I will come back with more details on that the next review and round of budget.
But that said, I'm fine with the way that you have the funding laid out for the IT right now. So I'm not arguing what you're doing for the budget. I just when you come back, let us know exactly what you want. And if it's less, great. If it's more, we'll take a look at it then as we go through and figure out what kind of phasing, if it needs to be happen, or can we move money. But for right now, I'm okay with what you have laid in for the IT budget.
Great. Thank you, Phil. So moving ahead from IT, our library assets budget. So this is our hard copy materials and our electronic materials. The hard materials budget has been increased overall and recalibrated. We are underspending at this point. However, we missed about a quarter of ordering last year because we weren't allowed to have staff back in the building and weren't able to get up and running until the end of August, early September. So we missed a whole quarter of ordering new books and materials. That won't be the case this year. And we have taken advantage of being closed and some of the things we've seen with the kids collection in particular. And we've been doing a replacement program with our nonfiction in particular. And that project will be at the close of fiscal year. This fiscal year will be about halfway done. And so we're anticipating finishing that project in the next fiscal year. You'll see that the zip books purchase suggestions. This is an interesting fund, and I hope I'm not going to make it too confusing. I did increase it a little bit over what it was last year. The purchase suggestions, and I moved some funds from the other hard material budget to do this. Previously, we processed, you can submit a purchase suggestion through our library catalog. And then we've had this other function called zip books, wherein you can put in a request for a book to be zipped to you. Initially, this was funded completely by the state. And when the pandemic hit, we took over funding. The state wasn't certain of whether or not it would continue to be able to provide us funding. And last year it was. Initially, you'll remember that they provided us with a check and it was included as a line item. Halfway through that fiscal year, they stopped sending us checks and they asked us to invoice them directly. So last year, in total sum, we received $8,500 in zip book requests, money from the state. It didn't come to us. So when I say received, it didn't. Nobody actually sent us a check. We sent those invoices up. We've talked in the past about, and I anticipate we'll see about the same amount of money this upcoming fiscal year. It is not reflected in the budget, again, because we will continue to invoice the state. That's their process. They have been funded. $1 million will be coming down to libraries we have talked about in the past how ZipBooks works. We keep books that we purchase through ZipBooks. 93% of what we order, we keep. 7% is usually too obscure, and we, applying that collection development criteria, don't think it will circulate, and we don't incorporate it into the collection. With purchase suggestions, we evaluate those against, and this is two very different programs, not different programs, similar programs that have been operating slightly differently. Purchase suggestions, we apply that collection development criteria upfront. So there's not that, we don't just purchase everything outright like we did with ZipBooks. What we would like to do is to continue to fulfill our patrons' requests, but to eliminate that 7% that we don't incorporate into the collection. So we'll be applying collection development criteria upfront while fulfilling the request using that model of ZipBooks that gets people materials quickly. And what we found, and I was evaluating purchase suggestions for the first part of this pandemic year, a number of those we end up ordering through Amazon anyway. A significant portion of those end up coming from Amazon. They're not available through our Baker and Taylor processing book company. So we've talked the staff and I have talked at length about this and how to better combine these two programs, make it easier for people to understand, make things fair, and also provide good customer service while still meeting our community's needs and adding things to the collection. Again, this is something that we haven't been able to do to the same level that we were able to pre-pandemic in terms of collection cultivation. And so this is another function of that. So that's the change that you see there, and the change in the name of that, what that's meant to reflect, and how we want to start doing that on July 1. And we'll communicate that with patrons. Are there any questions about that? I know ZipBooks is complicated. I know we've talked about it a lot in purchase suggestions. But we're trying to continue to reevaluate how we do this and how we respond to those types of requests. And purchase suggestions have always been around. Libraries have always evaluated those. So that's not anything new, but ZipBooks kind of changed how we did things.
So Ashley, this is Tara. As I understand it, so you would apply some criteria prior to someone being able to order something through ZipBooks so that you can be at least relatively assured that you will be able to incorporate that book later into the collection.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, we will.
Right.
Hold on for just, I've got a person waving at me. I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting. Hold on just a second. It's the hazard of having a big window. I apologize. Question about 4th of July flags.
I have a question.
Yes.
Don't you think that our electronics, the ZipBooks and the Overdrive and all that, takes 6-7 months of the way things are changing to really know how we're going to be with these? This year is going to be a year of transition. So really not going to know whether to go a full year maybe on how people have changed their lifestyle. They may go back to not Zip, and Overdrive may not be as popular as we think they're going to be. People may want to go back to the library again once things change. I think it's this next year is just going to be not a lot of real, it's going to be a change. I don't know how to put it in words, but people might change their attitudes and want to go back. Like, I want to go back to the library. I don't want to get things online. How are people going to react?
Well, the the nice thing about the budget and working with all of you is that if we see any major pendulum shifts anytime during the year, we can do budget adjustments and change that if we need to. I mean, this is just library details. When you look at purchase suggestions and zip books, on our library back end, we have each ordering area, each section of the Dewey range, numbered out for the allocations of how much we spend on each thing. And then we rotate, every couple years who orders that section so that fresh eyes are on however we're ordering that. One of the things that was a challenge with purchase suggestions was, the librarians would have the things that they had reviewed and wanted to order or were doing their weeding and replacements, and somebody would come in with a purchase suggestion and they're like, well, I didn't factor this purchase suggestion into my order area. This pulls it out and makes a specific fund for that so that we can do our focused ordering in these areas. And I'd like to try out doing it like this based on my experience in the past. So.
Thank you.
The one question I would ask Ashley, do people understand the customers, patrons or whatever, understand zip books, and is there an implied contract that if I order a zip book, you're gonna get it for me? The filter that you're putting on, is that expected when I order a zip book? Do I expect that you're gonna decide whether I get it or not?
At this point, we do have parameters on there, and those are associated with cost and format. So there are some parameters in place. We aren't just ordering everything you ask for. If you want us to get a $100 art book, the answer will be no. We're not. But in terms of that collection development criteria, we haven't applied that to this. So we will be working on communicating the difference between. As we combine the two programs, we'll be working on communicating that to our patrons. We might not order everything that you asked for like we were with zip books. Here are the new parameters for how we're evaluating your purchase suggestions.
But we know that people go to more than one library. So if they go to the Oakland library and the zip book conditions are such, and then you have different conditions, is that going to be an issue?
There already are different conditions that libraries have in place for zip books. Some libraries actually charge $1 or $2 to process a zip book, so that's already in place. And what we were discussing doing right now is people are using zip books, and this is always interested in semantics. Is there something that, as we combine these two things, that functions that we've been doing, something different that we can call it, so that people don't confuse it with zip books?
I think that's the direction I was going, is maybe there's a different program here. And by the way, the book was only $75, not $100.
Yeah, we'll be working on a name. And in the past, it was just simply called purchase suggestions, and then we added zip books in. And so again, that's why I put those two terms together as we try to figure out how to make it the least amount of confusing for patrons as we combine these two things.
I think you have to worry about making it the least amount of work. You don't want to end up individually, evaluating every one of these requirements, or maybe you do, but in a way that's efficient, not random.
Well, it doesn't feel random now. It just feels unequal in how we're evaluating zip books versus purchase suggestions. So this will fix that and combine these two things so that we're doing purchase suggestions and zip books as one whole program. The last remaining item is what to call it and that communication. So we'll have that ready July 1st.
The new and improved system.
Yes, exactly. So moving on, is there any questions about our hard copy ordering? And I think John kind of asked the question about, what do we do if there's a big shift and people are coming in the library more and we see an influx of requests? And again, we can change that, but because our circulation numbers at this point have stabilized, and we've kind of seen something similar over this year, and I do think there'll be a year of transition. I think it keeping our budgets for purchasing largely status quo will be good. And again, for kids materials, we'll continue that. replacement program, and we're always looking at teen, how we can better serve the teens in our area. And we're still working with our high school librarian on that, to try to figure out how to balance out our collection. What are they ordering? What can't they order that we could possibly order? And so we'll keep moving forward with that. Let's see, our tech services budget will increase $3,000 from the previous fiscal year. We were off in my estimate of our cataloging needs from OCLC, and that was because of some back billing issues. I apologize if we're not catching that sooner, but this has been recalibrated, and I think that this is spot on. This is the amount of money we should have had in the budget last year. For our electronic materials, just as we do every year, we evaluate, and thanks to Katie O'Connell, who took over Jean's role doing this for me and helping me with this. We take a look at all of our databases, how they're being used, what the cost per use is, what the benefit is. And if you ever want to see that chart, it's wonderful and also color coded. I'm happy to share it with you. I'm recommending removing some of those databases that just aren't getting used and are costly to have. And then one of those is a Sanborn Maps. That's a fire maps. Katie found a much less expensive version of that through another company. So that won't go away entirely. That will still be available to our patrons who use that and do that local research. The Hoopla and Canopy budgets, proposing to increase those for this next fiscal year. I think we'll still see demand for those. Prior to the pandemic, again, I know I'm a broken record, but we were seeing a slow increase, which isn't a bad thing, of people starting to use our electronic resources. As we're in this transition year, as John mentioned, people may come back into the library and say, I want books only. Again, I'm tired of this electronic stuff. Or they could be happy with using a hybrid approach to learning and reading, which is some things are electronic and some things are hard print materials based on availability. So I'd like to, and that increase is reflective of where we are in terms of the budget at this year to date. We didn't end up purchasing as many ebook titles through Overdrive. The consortium went into super high gear in terms of ordering new titles during the pandemic. And so we've kept kind of on track, treating those things like purchase suggestions. Are these things going to circulate? Are they additional copies to supplement holds list? And applying that collection development criteria to our ebooks. And again, those, we've talked about this before, those are more expensive. So we're cognizant of that. And then our last section here is programs. We have done programs this year, of course. They've been virtual, which is no cost. So good for the budget, but not reflected there in the same way it has been in the past. I'm hoping that we will be able to return to programming. I'm looking forward to getting some things going in the park for story times and for kids, and bringing some of our performers back, which is a good portion of that budget. You'll see some of those things start to come back, I think, this summer as we work through outside library in this transition. And I think that's it for the big overall picture of this. What I've presented to you is a balanced budget based on the requests I placed with the Carmel Public Library Foundation for funds for next fiscal year, and the anticipated income from the Friends of the Library, which the book sale will be smaller. I anticipate they'll see a drop in revenue, and I've talked to the Friends about this estimate. I feel confident in that. Plus, they are taking money in at the farmers market, and that is what I have. Are there any questions about everything overall?
John, any questions?
No, she explained it very well. I have a few things about like the computers. I think go to the laptops maybe the first year and see if we have complaints if people want a bigger screen or something like that. If laptops may be the way to go, they're becoming a thing that everybody's using now.
Right. Don? You're on mute.
Yep. I was through this before, and I'm very happy with the way the numbers play out. The other topic is the issue from the city of the maintenance work and whatnot that needs to be done. And there was a flurry of activity to provide some communication, maybe some negotiation. I don't know if this is the right time to ask Ashley to comment on the status of that. Maybe we should finish this conversation and come back to that.
I can comment on it quickly. That conversation that the council's having is not done yet. They did go through. We had a budget review. May 18th was our last budget meeting, and they'll be taking another look at it coming up June 1st. They'll be deciding on projects. Their focus at the last meeting was deferred maintenance, and that would include the projects, some of the projects that we had proposed. And next year, I will say, it hasn't been something that we've done typically, and I'm not sure why, and this fiscal year really brought it home to me. Next fiscal year, starting in January or February, I would like the Board of Trustees to start a conversation to make those recommendations for the capital improvement plan. It's been the library director working with the Public Works Department, and once projects have been approved or we've done something with CPLF, it's come to the board, and that's very backwards, and I apologize for not catching it sooner. But I would like to start that conversation in February to make those recommendations.
Yeah, because that whole issue that what was up for approval was $50,000 in consulting, and the capital improvement money relative to painting and whatnot was put off, and it was all lumped together. And I think the opportunity to even work with the foundation to find a way to, improve the position, those numbers, and do something about getting at least the outside of the building painted in 1 year and moving forward with something like that. I think that's important. And I think as trustees of the library, I think that's a component of what we need to worry about. So your anticipation of something next year, I think, is welcome. Thanks.
Okay. Susan, do you have any questions back there? Are you?
No.
All right. Tara?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So we've reviewed the proposed budget. Are we going to see this next time to vote on it, or is this all we have to do with the proposed budget?
If you, I mean, so far what I've heard is to come back with a more definitive recommendation in terms of what we need for IT, whether or not that line item needs to be adjusted. And so I can do that and be prepared to speak to that at our meeting in June.
Okay.
That'll be our budget adoption date once I've got that information for all of you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you. Do we have any, we're over our hour here, so do we have any future agenda items we want to bring back that, other than the budget, which is coming back for approval next time?
The only other item I have on my radar at this point in time is the audit. I've been talking to our auditors, so I'll have an audit. It might be June, maybe the July meeting, but I'll have the auditors will be here to provide a report.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.